To AZ104 Microsoft Azure Administrator course. Today is day 4, and we're going to cover up administer PaaS compute option. Along with that, we're going to understand about monitoring and also data protection. So without further ado, let's get started. So when we talk about administer PaaS compute option, it's where we need to configure Azure App Service Plan and also Azure App Service. If you haven't been in knowing about the Azure App Service, it's more like a serverless architecture, we can call it, or serverless services. So you don't need to spin up any servers like VMs. And we also going to learn about Azure container instances. And in the lab, we will try and demonstrate about the web apps, container instances, and if time permits, then Azure container apps. So, and when we administer PaaS compute options, we need to look at the different options available and why would we choose Azure App Service or Azure container instance or so on. So let's go through some discussion on that one. So how would we describe the difference between containers and virtual machines? If someone asks you like that, then it's just simple answer is containers provides only lightweight isolation, where VM provides complete isolation. So VM runs the entire operating system, but containers only run the OS services and the components that are needed. Containers are deployed with Docker and orchestrated with AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. And VMs are deployed and managed using a different tools within the Azure. And containers can also use local disk and the file shares, where VM uses a virtual hard disk and file shares. So that's a kind of a high-level difference. And if we need to understand about an app service plan, then an app service plan defines a set of compute resources for a web app to run, because it's, as the name suggests, it's app service. It runs the web-based applications, and the plan determines what performance you need, what price you're going to pay, what features you want for your web app in terms of the hardware and the infrastructure support point of view. As the app service provides enterprise-grade hosting and enterprise-grade security. So all the necessary installation, all the necessary infrastructure is there supported as a part of that plan. Excuse me. You can always enhance the security by applying additional security measures like, say, advanced or the standard DDoS, because only basic element is covered with that. So you can always put some additional security measures in it. And also the app service, the disk space available for the web app, and also the processing element, which is also covered in this app plan as well. The other beauty of app plan is you can auto scale. So you can automatically scale up and down as per your demand, as per the web application's demand. And you can have deployment slots available. So in a deployment slot, for an example, you have a live version of web app is running. You want to deploy a new version. You can use a deployment, you create a deployment slot, deploy your services, and then you can switch over. And the switching happens in less than some seconds or minutes, less than a minute. But ultimately, what benefit it gives is if you really need to deploy the services to live services, it might take minutes or even hours, or sometime you need to actually figure out whether the deployment has worked according to your plan and all this troubleshooting. While you're performing all this troubleshooting, your live app should have absolute minimum or no downtime at all. And for that particular reason, the deployment slot is going to be very useful for utilization. So again, another example I can give you in terms of the deployment slot, because you will, if you're working with the app plans, you will be using that more frequently. So say a staging instance and a production instance you have in a deployment slot, or you can create a deployment slots or live app with their own host names. You can have a deployment slot help you validate changes before making the app live. So those are the benefit it brings. And it eliminates pretty much all the downtime at all. Excuse me. And also deployment slot can be tagged, or it can be fallback as a good known site. So just in case if you deploy a new services and if that doesn't work as per your plan, you can always switch back to the previous deployment slot. Okay. If you are administering an Azure web app, you will need to monitor, secure, and back up the app, because these are the kind of other measures you need to keep in your plan sessions or planning app services session. Monitoring includes usage stats, outages or page views, user sessions, performance, and any sorts of troubleshooting information. Securing task includes like access, authentication, certificates, identity, and so on, where the backup decisions make sure all your part of the web app can be restored at any time for the failover perspective. And as well as the frequency of the backup, there's something you need to consider in your planning. And creating a custom domain name is another important task that there are certainly other important tasks as well. So that you need to perform along with the web app. So because when you host a web app, you don't want the domain name to say app name dot on Microsoft.com or something like that. So for that one, you need to have either you host it on your another domain name or subdomain or something that needs to be parked as well. But when we're parking this domain or configuring the domain, we need to bring SSL certificate to secure that site as well. So those are the elements you need to think about. So also this main factoring here is how much control you need. So while you're setting up a web app, sometimes you don't really need any control at all. And you can say, okay, fine, absolutely. I don't care about what hardware side or what infrastructure side happens because I want someone to take care of it. In those situations, you can typically consider Azure App Service Plan, because then you only need to worry about your web app or mobile app and any backends you need to use. You don't need to worry about infrastructure, don't need to worry about any hardwares or security element, because all those services are all provided. But then you need a mixture of control, but also you want to concentrate on a certain development task only, which you probably you are very good at. In that situation, you need to choose the right options available here. You can containerize the application and then simply deploy it and push it into your production environment, or distribute the application along with your container services. So those are Azure Container Apps. And you can orchestrate using AKS, so Azure Kubernetes Service, and deploy your services as and when needed. So how would you configure app service plan? Because app service plan is your base before you create an app. So you need to define a set of compute resources for a web app to run. So what do you absolutely need to run your web app, whether number of virtual CPUs or amount of RAM or drive spaces or even performance measurement, or what price we can afford to actually go live with, any other features you need, or even you can call it what particular language you need to develop that app in, and you need to have that support on. So it's Behind the scene, the app service supports Windows and Linux environments. So you need to be mindful, like, which framework you want to run for your app. Also, you need to think about one or more web app can be configured to run in the same app service plan. So don't kind of restrict your plan that restricts your multiple deployments. So plan it properly, plan in advance, and then choose the right service plan for your one or more applications. Changing an app service plan is also possible, but there is a process you need to follow. Also, you need to think about region where the compute resources will be created. So every time you create app, you will be asked which region you want to deploy to. Number of virtual machine instance, size of virtual machine instance, or pricing tier. Again, behind the scene, technically, architecturally, app service has some source of VM or virtual machines running, but you don't maintain it, you don't manage it. It's something a cloud service provider does. So what are the type of plans available? So this is a high level overview here. So you have a free plan, which allows how many apps to be hosted, which is 10. Then you have a shared dev test, which is not for the production, but it allows 100 apps to be hosted. Basic dedicated dev test, that one allows unlimited. But then you go with the production standard workload, then you go unlimited as well, and so on. Premium, isolated, these are the difference. The majority of the difference comes in those lower other slots, which is, or the features. So it starts with the 1 GB of space to goes up to basic has a 10 gig, standard has a 50 gig, premium has 250 and 1 terabyte. So depending on your application, if your application is very resource hungry, your application requires lots of database storage, and requires a lot of processing within the environment itself, probably isolated is the best choice for you, but it comes with a good big chunk of money as well, the cost. Auto scaling only supported for standard upwards, so standard, premium, and isolated. Auto scaling is not supported in basic, shared, or free environments. Or the service plan. The deployment slots also only supports in standard, premium, and isolated. So you can see that, it is not supported at all in basic, shared, or free. If you are in a basic and if you try to create a deployment slot, you will get prompt that you must upgrade to standard or higher. The maximum instance you can create on this one is up to 3 for the basic, nothing for the shared and free, and you have a 10 for standard, 30 for premium, and 100 for isolated. So when you have a all this app service plan is mainly it's a shared compute. So you create a plan. Just let's put it this way. When you create a plan, you configure something like a VM telling that how many virtual CPU, memory, space, and all this thing you configure, and then you run multiple apps on it. So this is how it works. So it's the same as the Azure VM and other apps. It also uses service apps, and the resources cannot scale out. That's about the shared compute. But dedicated compute, you have a basic, standard, and premium plan here. That's a more dedicated compute, which run apps in the same plan in dedicated Azure VM. But when it comes to isolated, they run apps on a dedicated Azure VMs. So it's only dedicated to you on that one. So it's not really a shared. And it has a dedicated Azure virtual networks as well. This is about scale up and scale out of app service plan. So you can simply just define instance count and what is whether you want to do a manual scale or custom auto scale. You can define those parameters here. Scaling up requires more hardware. That means CPU, memory, disk, and so on. More features like dedicated virtual machines, staging, slots, auto scaling. That's all available within this part of them. But scale out is either manual, fixed number of instances, and auto scale happens based on the predefined rules and schedule. So like we seen in the virtual machine, it's a similar kind of auto scaling. When you configure service plan scaling, you then define the metrics. So either metrics or based on the specific instance. When you define the metric, you can put it down like other rules which related to metric. That's where you can count CPU percentage, memory percentage, or HTTP request. So number of requests, say, with this kind of plan, my app service can serve probably 10,000 requests an hour. And if you have the more requests coming in, then it needs to be auto scaled. So those kind of rule you can define. Instance scaling limit, which starts with a minimum 1, you can have more, and then maximum you can define the number so it doesn't overrun too much and it doesn't give you surprises in terms of the cost. And what is a default one? So those definitions, you can put it down there. Scale according to the schedule. So you can scale it based on the weekdays, weekend times, holidays, because it depends on your business type. Probably if it is like, say, you're selling tickets for the like summer festivals or anything, then you probably want to scale that up at that period of time because you're going to get more and more people hitting the website or web application. Okay, we're going to create app service plan, and we're going to see the demonstration. Let's go through this slide